What is up, guys? You're about to listen to episode number 15 of the Third Floor Chronicles. This week's special guest, Mr. John Heffron. We recorded this Sunday, September 4th, right before the 7 o'clock show. Check it out. Tell us about your very first stand-up experience. Where were you at? How old were you? Do you remember any of your jokes?
Yeah, my first stand-up experience was, I'm from Detroit originally, was in Alpena, Michigan. That's about maybe 150, 200 miles outside of Detroit. And it was in, actually, you know what, I'm telling you my story of my first paid one. But I'll go ahead and tell the story anyway. It was in a bowling alley. It was called the Thunderbird Bowling Alley, and it was $50. I got paid $50 to drive 300 and some miles, and I emceed. So that was my first one. But my first actual just get on stage as a comic one, I was going to a comedy club in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and there's a hot waitress. And basically, I was going every Tuesday for open mic just to sit in her section because she was just crazy gorgeous. So I was completely. And then one of the times she goes, "You're here a lot." I go, "Yeah, you know, I think I want to do this." Even I didn't, and I was just chatting her up. And she goes, "Well, we have open mics on Tuesday. You should come next week and perform." So I go, "Yeah, probably. Oh, yeah, I should." So you know, in that dumb 18-year-old, I can take on the world. I had to come up with an act in a week with having no experience, not even having, and I went up. Actually, no, but before I went on stage, Tim Allen came in and wanted to do a guest set. So he wasn't like Tim Allen that we know him. You know, he was kind of a local guy, but he just, you know, he was obviously a pro at the time, crushes in front of me. Then I get on stage, and actually did well. Like I did, it wasn't terrible. It was, you know, they could tell I was 18. But the crowd was kind of 18, so I got a little bit of leeway. And then I was hooked. And by the way, that waitress turned out to be, well, didn't turn out to be, she was at the time, Lucy Liu from Charlie's Angels.
Nice.
So, yeah. So even though today, if I saw Lucy Liu and we were walking, I don't think she'd recognize me. And she doesn't realize she completely set off my entire path of life.
Would you say anything to her?
I probably would. I would probably see, and then, you know, and then she would just go, "Oh, that's nice," and probably just crush it. Yeah.
So did you have about 5 minutes for your first?
Yeah, five minutes. And what I did is, I think in college, I had a speech class, and we had to give a humorous speech. So I like joked about beating up my brother and sister, and I basically did the speech. Because I remember my speech, I got graded down because I didn't have a lot of structure. The guy said it was funny, but there wasn't structure. So, yeah.
After that, how long were you still hitting open mics weekly, or did it take you a while to go back on stage? How'd that work?
Then it was nonstop. Then it was very, can I do this again next week? Can I do this again next week? And then at the time, there was maybe 20 open micers deep. All of us were in college. And then we started doing comedy at the University of Michigan at the Student Union, where you could, at the time, you could drink. You know, so they would have a school event and let the students booze it up. So it was like the greatest atmosphere ever. Because, you know, you're going, "Hey, my roommates suck. Ah, our roommates suck." So it was a really cool, you know, cool environment. And that was my, you know, that was my thing.
When you were doing those open mics that first year, were you doing like a new 5 minutes? Were you trying to work on the same 5 minutes? How did you approach that your first year?
I don't remember the first year, but I think because it was all so new, everything was like a bit, because you're just kind of at 18, 19 in college. You're really discovering a bunch of stuff for the first time. Girls, I mean, like real, not even, I look back, none of those were real relationships, but at the time, you're living on your own. Like, everything you did was a crazy new bit or new, you know, and stuff like that. Yeah.
Besides that Tim Allen experience, who was one of the first comics you got to work with, maybe if you were hosting or featuring that you're an actual fan of?
The very first guy was Richard Jenny. I popped in to watch him do a set. And I think I haven't paid to get in. Like, I was so kind of new that the club was like, "No, you're going to pay. You're just an open micer." And then something happened, and the club owner said, "Do you want to go on stage?" And I went up, and I did 5 minutes. And I have the tape of that, and my parents just moved in the van they were driving, or the mover was driving, got hit by a car, and the guy didn't have insurance, so they impounded the van with all of my parents' shit in it, and they don't know where any of that went. And that tape of me performing that night is in that truck on a VHS, which just sucks.
Did Richard Janney do the lobster bit when you seen him?
Yeah, it was kind of, you know, it was so, and he was the first headliner, and then I saw him, and he had like a hot girlfriend with him, or why, I have no idea, it was 20 years ago. He had a hot girl with him, and I'm like, man, that would be the way to do it, you know?
You went to Eastern Michigan University.
Yeah.
Is that where you got most of your gigs at the beginning, like college stuff?
I drove, you know, most of my gigs were, you know, max maybe 50 miles away, and it just so happened in Michigan at the time you could host or do open mics probably Tuesday through Sunday, you know, so I was just constantly going, and then I would host shows and made a few bucks, but it was still kind of, I never had to be a waiter or do anything like that through college. I made my spending money, you know, doing comedy.
How would you compare a college crowd versus a typical comedy club crowd? At least back then for you.
Back then, it's, I really related to that crowd because everything, you know, I was living their life. And that's kind of what happens with my stand-up now. I'm just a little older, but so is my crowd. So my whole career, I've talked about what's going on in their life. The hardest jump now is a guy who's 40 to make sure a 21-year-old isn't completely bored because they're in a different headspace than I am.
Do you think graduating from college somehow made you appreciate comedy a little differently than someone maybe just started doing it out of nowhere, like the way you maybe you disciplined yourself to get better?
Yeah, you know what it did? If anything, it gave me 4 years or 5 years or whatever it took me to graduate from college to basically really hone my act and do open mics and stuff. So I got the college education and stuff like that. But then when I got out of college, the very next year I probably was, you know, performing at 100-some colleges a year. Because my act was so primed for that age group. You know, what's up with taking tests and stuff? So I would perform, do all these college conventions and just crush it. So that's what happened there. So my college education basically gave me the education to then go off and perform at colleges for a real while, and then that built me even stronger to then take it to this level. Then, you know.
Were you booking those shows yourself? Those comedy?
No, I had a college agent at the time. She's no longer in it, but yeah, I had a college agent at the time, and then the rest of the club stuff, I humped it and hustled myself. So
were you headlining at that time? How much time were you doing when you were doing those gigs, I should say?
Colleges, I was doing 45 minutes, you know, and then featuring at clubs, but I was to the point where I was so strong as a feature that a lot of the headliners had a hard time. You know, it all kind of happened around the same time, you know.
Tell us, how'd you get involved with Last Comic Standing? How did that opportunity even present itself for you?
I was down in Tampa at the Tampa Improv, where my wife was working as a barback here at the club.
Okay.
And then she lived here in Tampa, so I was down visiting her. She wasn't my wife at the time. She was just dating her. And then I was going up to Michigan, and then Last Comic auditions were in Nashville. So I was flying and had a layover in Nashville anyway, so I bumped my flight to leave a little bit later, went and auditioned for it in Nashville. I did it on a whim, might as well, maybe I can get on one episode, and that's all, yeah.
When you won Last Comic Standing, what was the biggest challenge you faced after winning such a high-profile event?
I had to crank out material. I did maybe 12 sets on Last Comic, never repeating a joke, and then when I started touring, when now a lot of people showed up, I felt the need that they don't want to hear the same thing that they just heard. Which that's always debatable, but that was just my mental thing at the time, which was crazy because I wrote what I think was funnier stuff quicker than any other part. So the 10 years leading up to there, then the 2 months after, I had a whole new hour that I thought was better than anything I've ever done. So then it kind of just showed me that, you know, when you're put to the wall, you can crank out that stuff. When you challenge yourself, like if you're starting off comic and you're like, how do you get 30 minutes? Well, the best way to get 30 minutes is just start doing 30-minute sets.
After you won, did you go on like a LCS tour? Did all you guys go
No, I was by myself. I never did a tour with all those guys.
Did it translate immediately into your fan? Did you see your fan base kind of grow?
Yeah,
instantly?
definitely.
Did you have people like finishing any of your punchlines or anything like that?
It's a weird thing, and then for every one person that really wants to hear a bit you've done before, you get one person that goes, "I've heard that before," and it's those. I used to let those people bother me, but now I realize it's them. They're like the people who get desensitized to porn, and they can only watch porn clips every 30 seconds and bounce to another one. Where just enjoy what you're watching. So it's
Which was the bigger, what was more stressful for you? Last Comic Standing or your first Tonight Show experience?
Probably my second Tonight Show experience was the most stressful. I always, as much TV as I've done and as many live shows, it's a different muscle that I kind of get in my head a little bit when I have to do a 4.5 minute set. Because I'm so long-winded. Cutting my jokes down to really just be like almost one-liners is really hard for me to do.
Well, why did you say your second one versus your first?
Because everyone told me that there was some crazy second Tonight Show jinx that you never crush on your second one. You always do really well on your first one, and then your second one never goes as well. So I kind of,
How do they kind of help you structure your 5-minute bit, or do they just say bring your best 5 that you got, or how did you work on
No,
you
give them their 5, and then they throw their input in and say take this joke out, put this joke first. They kind of start meddling with it more than you would like, because then it doesn't feel natural to you because it's not your stuff.
Well, in preparation for that, were you trying to segment maybe that 5 minutes a couple times before you actually performed it? Like, were you going...
It's hard, though, but, like, when you headline, let's say when you do 5 or 6 shows a week in their hour and 20 minutes, to even do that 5 is always really weird. So that's what makes it... I know guys that, if you're in New York, I guess you can bounce around clubs and work on your 5 and hit 5 clubs in a night and just do your 5, but... being on the road or living in Los Angeles, you don't have that opportunity.
How'd you get involved in that Gene Simmons roast on A&E?
I did a pilot with Gene Simmons, and then he used me on his show a couple times, and then he, just called and asked if I want to do it. I had a good time with that. That was the only roast that I ever did.
Is that something you'd want to do?
I don't know if I liked it, because it's that's a whole nother writing muscle, in its thing, but it was cool.
You've done a couple Comedy Central presents. Did you have any creative control over the final product that's aired?
Yeah, I've done 3. I've done 2 half hours and then an hour. And no, not editing, not from the editing part. You just kind of you cheat. It's actually a 22-minute show, and they want 30-some minutes so they can edit. So you kind of fall in between and give them 28. So you're only giving them 2 minutes to edit. Yeah. So
is that something someone told you?
Yeah. There's kind of a way you buck the system to make sure,
Was it easier recording each additional one after you did one before?
Yeah, just from experience, Yeah. It's definitely now if you do them, or if I ever do a 4th one, which I should do soon, to me it's just another show. There just happens to be cameras in the back.
How long after you recorded does it actually air on TV for you?
Mine were like 6 months to a year.
So by the time it comes out, you're already doing new.
Yeah, that's what's nice, is you can kind of rotate it and kind of start having that in the back of your mind.
So when you sign up for Comedy Central Presents, do they sign like 2 at a time, or you do one? They see how that goes and see how another one goes?
They just do one, and then the last one I did, what they kind of do is comics actually, you find a distributor, you shoot it, and then they try to sell that special to Comedy Central.
You've done 3 albums too. You did 3 albums in 3 years. How stressful was that? Turn around that much material.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's just, it's funny. As a comic, you can do it if you just decide to do it. It's one of those things. It's like if you have 10 things you got to accomplish on a Saturday, or one thing. If you have that one thing, it might take you all Saturday to do. And if you have the 10 things, you can knock it all out. It's just kind of, it all depends on how important it is to you.
Well, is it your decision to do that many that quick, or is the label telling you we need 3 in 3 years?
No, it's kind of me, and now it's now I want to do another one and crank that out, and you just keep throwing stuff out there. Now it's just kind of, you just keep feeding the fire.
How many times you recorded before you use that recording as a special? Is it just one shot, or do you?
I only have done it in 1, but other guys have done it in 2. I kind of like the the two approach, but I've never had that opportunity.
Where did you record those 3 albums?
Various clubs. Like, I'll pick a club that sounds acoustically cool. And then the one I recorded, nobody heard because I got laryngitis or I got sick the night before and it just sounded like it. So,
which album did the best for you as far as sales go?
Probably this one I have called The Better Half. But I never with those, I never had anybody because I put them all out myself, so there wasn't that big of a push. But now it's changed. Now you can just throw up stuff yourself, and it's.
When you record an album, how much time? Okay, like say you record an album last month, so you want to work on new material. How much time? How long are you waiting before you go on stage? Can you headline right away, or do you need to start doing like 20-minute sets in order to get your material going?
I'm sorry, like if
you finish doing an album and you don't want to do that material anymore, and
you do the material, you don't ever start over. So that's never a problem. Like for what I'll do is I'll just go for a while. If I have some new stuff, I'll do 20% new, and then when that 20% gets a little stronger, then then you throw out an old. So to me, it's constant. Now I have 20-some years of comedy, and there's bits that used to be my closers, my money bits that I don't even remember.
Got it.
So it's just kind of a rotation, and then for me now it becomes kind of like jazz where I just, whatever I feel like kind of doing. Sometimes I'll do a greatest hit show, in my brain. Other times I'll kind of go new heavy, but it's kind of what I feel like doing.
When you're doing a weekend like you're doing in Tampa right now, do you switch up your set each night?
Yeah, it's pretty different. The beginning isn't. I just like to just kind of, and then the middle is where I mess around a lot, and just depending on time, I never really have a closer. It's kind of I look at my watch, and you want to get it that every one of your bits you could end on.
What's been the longest stint you've been on the road for?
I'm going every week, but I go home 1 or 2 days a week, so.
Do you have a home club you do new material, or just throw it in on the weekends?
I just throw it in on the weekends.
What do you prefer at this point, comedy clubs or theaters?
I like comedy clubs. Theaters is a little bit of a disconnect. So, I like theaters because it's more money and more people, but it is a little bit weirder.
So do you change your act itself when you do a theater versus a club, or just how you present them?
Present it. You just have to be a little bit bigger, even with your motions and how you walk and stuff, because,
You also have a reputation for doing a lot of corporate gigs, too. What's the best/worst part of doing corporate gigs?
They usually have, like, stick up their asses, and it's really tough. You're coming in after a bad speech, or so it's all about winning them over. A lot of times they don't want to be there. And the other part is it's 95% men, usually. Kind of like older dudes in suits, so it's kind of, you have that vibe. And you have to be super, super clean and stuff like that. But I've had some corporate gigs that were just awesome. Yeah. Like, just really, it's kind of just on how you handle the situation.
What's been the best advice any comic's ever given you?
To breathe, probably. That moment right when you get on stage, take a breath. A lot of guys want to start talking right away, but it's, just take that breath.
Last question for you, my friend. Give us your best bombing on stage story. At any point in your career?
There's been a lot, but the one that sticks out, that just in my thing, is I got hired to do a bar mitzvah when I don't know how old I was. I was probably 20, 21, and it was there's a table full of 16-year-olds, and after every joke I said, they said, "That's what your mom said." Group of 16-year-olds, and the dad came on stage, and eating, I'll never forget, he was eating like some chips or something. He goes, "They're not getting you." And he pats me on the shoulder. So at the time, those kids, when I was 20, they're 16, so 17, 18, 19, 20. They're only 4 years younger than me. At the time, I would like to actually, now that I think about it, I would like to see that dude now. Because now he's probably 30-something. I think that's totally legit to beat his ass.
I'd say so.
Yeah, right. It's not child abuse now.
Well, there you have it, folks. Episode number 15 is in the books. And if you like what you heard from John Heffron, be sure to visit his website, johnheffron.com. From there, you can find everything you need. Got the Amazon links. You can just order the iTunes and the Facebook, Twitter. Got the YouTube, merchandise. Come on. You know how it works, guys. 2011, just Google the comic and you'll get everything you need. Also, be sure to visit my website, joeriga.com. And until next time, on behalf of the Tampa Improv, Matthew Baldwin, my name is Joe Riga. Thank you for listening.